I am the general manager of the San Diego at Your Table location. So we're going to go over some basic, I want to just talk about some different knives that I have in my own kitchen and home and how I go about sharpening those. And we'll talk about safety and making sure we're doing that the proper way. So before we get started too, I want to talk to everybody about a little bit of safety moment here. So this is what we use in the restaurant industry. It's called a cut glove. Okay, so for those of us that don't know what it is, it's got a really thick polyester, I think, and I don't even know what it's made out of. Let's check. Never mind, the tag's still worn down. But you can find these in any restaurant supply house. They're really common in the restaurant industry. This will stop you from cutting off any little
You are now being placed in the meeting.
and slicing up your hands and stuff if something slips. Again, so we're using these a lot in the restaurant industry. They're really easy to use. You're going to go ahead and slide that on your hand. That's going to be the hand that you're not holding the knife with. So I'm right-handed. I'm going to put this on my left hand. My recommendation when you're buying these, even for home use, it's really nice to have a vinyl glove too. It keeps them a lot cleaner in between casts and just in general. You can wash them in your washing machine too. They do hold up really well. Just make sure you go ahead and pull the tips of that down onto the actual glove itself so you're not cutting off the pieces of vinyl. So again, anytime, especially when we're working in an actual commercial kitchen, we're going to have these on all the time. But I do recommend for home cooks, especially if you're not that comfortable with a knife, going ahead and getting one of these. It's not a matter of if you're going to get cut, it's whenever you're using a knife. So I do highly recommend that. So again, any restaurant supply house will have these, or you can order them on Amazon. It's called a cut resistant glove or a cut glove. Okay. So highly recommend that we use those. But so again, like I said, today we're going to talk about sharpening knives and some different knives that I have in my house. If anybody has any kind of questions throughout this, go ahead and feel free to chime in. And so yeah, let's get going. So the first knife I have in my house is going to be a very basic kitchen chef knife. Okay, this is kind of going to be the workhorse of any personal chef or any professional chef. So this one, I actually have two of these. This is my Wusthof I have. This has a very firm blade on it. It's a very thick knife. It has two 20-degree angles on it. And like I said, I use this. This is going to be used for most of my heavy chopping, stuff like potatoes, root vegetables, processing meats, etc. Again, it has a really thick blade on it, so it cuts really well and I can handle it really well. Again, when I'm going to hold the knife, I'm actually going to grip it closer to the top, and I'm going to hold kind of over the blade. This one has that little bevel right there where it makes it kind of comfortable. Most knives will stop here, and I'll show you that here in a second. But again, this is one of my favorite knives to use at home. This is my workhorse. It's just a very kitchen-grade Wusthof knife. I highly recommend, just kind of for anyone that's going to do any kind of shopping for kitchen products or any kind of cookware that they are having at their house. Big box retailers like Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, so on and so forth, tend to be very overpriced on a lot of their products. And you have a lot of companies that'll put out these kind of over-the-top gadgets for kitchens. Everything you need, again, if there's a kitchen supply house in your area, any kind of restaurant depot, restaurant supply store, try shopping at those first. You get a lot of great quality products that are very basic, very dependable, and they don't cost a lot of money. So if you're looking for products, try to go to those kitchen supply houses again. I highly recommend that. My next knife I have here is probably one of my favorites. Okay, this is going to be my Miss Uno Japanese chef's knife. Okay, so again, another chef's knife. It just has a really thin blade on it. It's going to be a lot more for fine cut work. I'll use this to chop a lot of herbs or do a lot of those soft vegetables. Even I'll use this to fillet fish. It does have a little bit more flex in that blade. So again, that's another knife that I have in my house. Finally, one of my other favorite knives I have here, this is going to be a sushi type knife. Okay, you don't really have a lot of practical applications for this other than processing fish and doing kind of sushi rolls. But the interesting part about this knife is going to be the actual blade on it is going to be flat on the very back. And this blade is actually hollow on the back. You can't really see it, but it's going to be hollow. And the angle's all going to be on the front end of that blade. That's so it's going to hug that piece of sushi and give you a nice straight cut versus wanting to fall out to one side or the other. So again, not really practical unless you're trying to do a lot of sushi at your house. This is another knife I have at home. And finally, my main knife. I don't have that many. You don't really need that many. There's a lot of stuff out there that's kind of for the basic cook at house, you don't really need too many. This is what I use for my paring knife. I have fairly large hands, so I feel like smaller paring knives kind of disappear in my hand. This is only maybe a 4.5 inch blade on it. So I like this kind of knife to use at home for just smaller cut work or delicate paring, cutting shallots, and etc. So that's kind of the knives I do have in my house. Anyone have any kind of questions on different types of knives or anything out there that they may be concerned about? I typically don't carry like a bread knife at my house. My knives are usually pretty sharp to where I can cut a slice of bread. But that would be maybe something that somebody else would pick up with a bread knife, which is going to be that longer serrated knife, which allows you to cut into that piece of bread without kind of squishing it as it goes down. So, anyone else have any questions on that?
Just maybe a quick question, since you have
Yeah.
large hands. My hands are huge. Any brands that you would suggest? I
No,
keep
again, I
banging my
think
knuckles every time I do something.
yeah. So again, I same issue too. I think where I run into issues, and especially when I started cooking, when I have big hands, is as you grip over the top, I had a tendency to want to drop my thumb back or drop this knuckle down, and that would be real bad news when you're holding a knife. Most chef's knives, you have to just kind of train yourself to hold them real tight. Again, where I was talking about that paring knife, when you see a lot of other paring knives will have a blade that's a lot shorter and a lot smaller, and that just disappears in my hand. Go to the store, take a look at it. You can kind of tell what'll fit in your hand real well. There's not a specific brand. Most brands, any kind of knife brand will carry from the smallest kind of knife to these giant meat cleavers. So it's just kind of what works best, honestly. There's not a specific one that I would say would fit my needs, so on and so forth. This thing's probably been in my kitchen for, I don't know, 15 years. So
Awesome. Thank you.
hopefully that answers the question. Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to these sharpening products that I have. So first, we're going to talk about honing. So this is what they call a honing steel. So this is actually common misconception for this product right here is this is going to be used on a daily basis to maintain your sharpen level. Okay. This isn't going to be used to necessarily sharpen a knife. Once a knife goes dull, you'd be kind of hacking at this thing nonstop to try to get it back to sharp, and it's not going to be as effective. So you want to do that first initial round of sharpening with a stone, and then we're using this to kind of keep that blade. The other thing that's going to really be an advantage to you if you can get a good knife rack. You don't want to store your knives in a drawer for a couple of reasons. A, they're going to kind of bang together. And cause those knife edges to kind of dull. If you do have to store them in a drawer, most companies will make knife sleeves that you have plastic sleeve you can slide over the blade to keep that knife sharp. And also, I know I have little kids in the house. You don't want your kids reaching into a drawer full of knives. You don't want yourself reaching into a drawer full of knives. That's just bad news, especially if they're nice and sharp. Other ones that I've seen too, those restaurant supply houses will have the magnetic bar that you can actually just screw into your wall and you can place your knives on there. Those tend to, again, keep them out of kids' reaches, keeps the edges nice and sharp. So I'd recommend something like that too. Other products that I use around my house. So this is going to be a traditional knife sharpening stone. It's got a finer side on one, a coarse side on the other. I don't tend to like these for my kitchen knives too well. They kind of beat up the knife blade a lot, but I'll show you why I keep this around in just a second. This is going to be the easiest way if you want to. This is going to be, I'll show you this. This is a diamond coated blade or a diamond coated steel. So you just take it off. It's got a bunch of diamonds on top of this nice hard piece of steel. This would probably be the best way if you don't want to use a whetstone, which I'm going to show you here in a second. Real simple, real easy to use. Not a lot of maintenance to the actual stone, not a lot of having to think about it. We're going to use the same technique on this that I'm going to show you in a second with the whetstones. So finally, my last favorite piece that I use. I got to get the water off it here real quick. So this is what I use. This is what they call a Japanese whetstone. If you look for this, it's actually spelled Whetstone. So almost like a wheat or a whetstone, just minus the A in that. So this is going to be my coarser grade of that. It's going to be a 1000 grit stone. You can find these on Amazon. Got this, I think, for around $50. It's a king stone. It's a solid product. Again, I've had this probably for about 4 or 5 years, okay? So this is going to be the first stone that we're going to use. The other important thing is I actually started soaking these stones at about 9 o'clock last night. So I've had close to about 12 hours of soak on them. The longer it's going to soak, the more water the stone's going to absorb, and it's going to give you a better, cleaner product at the end, okay? My other Japanese whetstone I have is going to be a finer. It's about a 5,000 grit stone. This is going to be made to polish the blade and really put a nice fine edge on the end of that blade. One thing I'll show you without dripping on my laptop here. So these stones have been around for a while in my kitchen. I had a chef a long time ago show me. So I've actually, if you can see that, I've taken a pencil before I did it, before I soaked it, and I put grid marks into the stone. So what I'm going to do now, as I do that, and I'll show you in a little bit over the sink, is I'm going to take my nice other stone, and I'm going to go ahead and just lightly rub that, because I want to make sure that stone, before I start to sharpen, is really even. Because as I wear and as I've been sharpening stones, it'll get divots and everything inside of it. So I want a nice flat stone, as flat as possible when I start to sharpen my knife, which is the whole reason I keep this stone around. These stones don't wear down. I don't use steel on them at all. It's just going to be used to just kind of flatten out that softer whetstone there. So we'll show you how to do that in a second over the sink. The last product I want to show you, which is really fun. So if you're not too familiar with sharpening stones, especially in a whetstone, they make this cool little product you can find out there. It has two little slides on it, and it's going to hold your knife pretty much perfectly at that 20-degree angle on both sides. So what you're simply going to do is you're going to slide the knife into that, put it on the back side of the knife, and then you're going to lay that on the stone, and it's going to hold that angle, and it's really going to help you train yourself on what angle that stone is supposed to be at, or what angle that knife's supposed to be at across the stone. Because it has that slide and it's made for those whetstones right there, it's also not going to mark up your stone too bad or cause too many divots. It's meant to do that. Again, this only works for knives that are going to have that same kind of kitchen 20-degree angle on both sides, whereas my more expensive Japanese knife it's got about a 10-degree angle on one side and a 25 on the other, to again, where that's going to hug that piece or whatever I'm cutting to cause a straighter line. If I'm right-handed, this particular model, you can ask the manufacturer when you buy it to actually carve it into or sharpen it into a left-handed version. What's the little holder called? I haven't looked it up in a while. Whetstone trainer or a whetstone guard would probably be what that's called. I saw that in the chat box there. So. Okay, so that's all the products we're going to use before I start actually showing you how to sharpen a knife. Does anybody have any questions on anything, any other questions on anything I showed everybody? Cool. So again, especially the first time you guys are doing this at home, I'd highly recommend getting that cut glove, making sure that's on when you do that. It's really going to help save the ends of your fingertips. Let me just go ahead and reposition my camera here so I can just kind of show you how we kind of do this. So just give me one moment. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is over my sink here. So I've already taken the grid marks off of my coarser grit whetstone. So we're going to go ahead and set that off to the side. Normally what I'll do is I'll just run a little bit of water on it. I'm going to take the finer end on my actual stone, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get those grid marks off of my stone. If you do that under the water to kind of give it a little bit of lubrication, that'll help out. And getting that. So now, as you can see, I've taken that stone, and now all my grid marks are gone. Now I'm fairly positive that stone's going to be as flat as possible for when I run my knife edge over it, okay? So now coming back onto my sharpening platform here, I've taken a kitchen terry cloth towel and I've wet it a little bit, so it'll give me a little bit more traction on top of my counter. So first I'm going to place my coarser grit whetstone on there. I'll show you how to do one with the kind of whetstone trainer here first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my trainer edge nice and flat. Some people will do it like this. I do prefer, and I'll see a lot of videos where you're at kind of a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to simply take the knife and just back and forth a little bit. And I'm going to try to cover as much of that blade as possible. Switching angles, back and forth, back and forth. It's going to be a little tricky, and you do have to freehand the tip because as it curves, you need to bring the back of your hand up a little bit, and you can see I'm going to just barely kind of touch that stone. You can hear that sound. You always want to listen to the rhythm as you do it. That'll help ensure that kind of nice even mark. Then what you're going to do is you're going to kind of flip the knife a little bit. Same on the other way. It's always a little bit more tricky on that left hand of mine because I'm right-handed. But again, I'm going to use that. I'm letting the knife here, this trainer kind of do all of the work for me as far as keeping the angle on the knife, okay? So with that, I'm going to kind of keep going there, and I would repeat that process on that other stone. So now I'll kind of show you the free-handed version on my nicer knife here. So again, as I'm bringing the knife to the blade, if I don't have my trainer, I'm looking for most of our kitchen knives are going to be at that 20-degree angle. And a lot of people are going to say, wow, what's a 20-degree angle there? So what you need to do is, I've seen people say if you take a matchbook, you can kind of lay it on a matchbook and you can kind of tell what that angle is. Obviously, that's not going to slide with you. Or you kind of say 90, 45, cut that back in half, and that's going to be your 20. Again, this knife, like I said, is going to have a 10-degree angle on one side and a 25 on the other. So I'm going to bring it here. So as I'm holding this knife, I'm supporting the knife with this hand. I have all of my fingers clear of the blade, and I'm going to kind of give it a nice back and forth. I'm lifting a little bit as I get to that tip there. So what I'm doing when I produce this is I'm actually producing what they call a burr on the end of that knife. So I'm actually getting that knife to curl over, that edge to curl over the other side. And so at this point, the knife is not going to be as effective. So now I've had that edge kind of barely slightly curl over a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and flip that knife around. And now I'm going to hold that at that 25-degree angle about. Again, lifting when I get to that tip. You don't have to go hard. You don't have to go fast. It's just a little bit. Then what I like to do is now kind of reverse that burr again. Slide my knife back through one more time. Give it a couple passes. Okay? Hear the blade sliding nicely over. Okay, so now I have a decent edge on my knife. You can kind of run your finger across it again, not too hard. I can feel a little burr going one direction. So I'm going to give it another pass through. Not too hard. I have a little bit of this kind of clay matter built up on the knife. That's okay. You want to keep that for the one stone you're working, and then I give it a little rinse and a little pat down between stones. So now I'm going to move on to my next stone here, which is going to be my polishing stone. I'm going to repeat that process again. So just a small back and forth. As you can tell, this is a finer grit stone. It is going to just put a polish on it. It doesn't make as much noise, but I can hear and feel that same rhythm I was using. I'm actually, you can't see the rest of my body, but my whole upper body is kind of moving with that knife versus me running my hands back and forth, because that'll change your grip. So I'm committing to this grip that I have, this edge that I'm putting on that knife, and my whole upper body's kind of coming back and forth with it right now. Again, I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to run it over my polishing stone again, same way, lifting when I get to the tip to make sure I got even contact as much as possible throughout that whole knife. And then again, I'm going to give it one more pass through here, one more pass through here, maybe two, just because I felt like it. Okay, and now I have a really sharp edge on my knife, okay? So now that knife's ready to go. It's got a really nice edge. I would obviously give it a nice little wash before I hit some food with it, but I got a really nice edge on top of that blade. Now from here, what I'm going to show you too is now how to use that kind of honing steel. So once my knife kind of dulls throughout time, or where I don't necessarily need a new sharpening, but it's been kind of sitting around, or I've done a lot of product work with it. Okay, I'm going to grab that steel, and the easiest way to do that, you'll see a lot of people start flailing knives in the air on this thing. That's not the safest way to do that. I'm going to go ahead and take my honing steel. I'm going to place that edge right on top of that blade. Again, I'm going to find that 90, 45, 20-degree angle, and I'm going to give it a nice little pass through. Try to maintain that blade through the same angle throughout that whole honing steel, and that's going to kind of bring that blade back to life between your sharpenings, okay? All right. And that's pretty much it. That's really easy. It's not too long of a process. Anybody have any questions on kind of the sharpening or anything that I covered there? Again, if we're using that diamond plated stone that I showed you before, they do really well, but what we need to do is make sure we're doing the same process with that knife. Nice and slow, 20-degree angle, back and forth, back and forth. Again, you couldn't see it as I'm doing it, but I'm holding the knife and my whole body is moving with that knife versus me changing the angle on my hands as I did it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where did you learn how to do all this wizardry?
So a couple different people. Years ago, I looked it up. I got really into kitchen knives when I started getting into the culinary. YouTube's a great example. So you have somebody like myself kind of walking people through it. As I've talked to people through years in the kitchen, word of mouth, people share tips. Like I said, the grid work that came from another chef friend of mine who works in a sushi restaurant. The reason I like the whetstones is I feel like they don't take a lot of actual steel off your knife. They tend to just, whereas some of the other stones will really beat up a knife in order to get it sharp. And after years of doing that, your knife's an inch shorter than it was when you started. So
Yeah, I've always used the first stone that you said you used to polish your stones with. So I've been working on it. It's something that really does take a certain touch, and I'm a firm believer in using the honing steel every day, and teaching people in the kitchen that the difference that that makes is really key. And once they feel the drag on the steel, and then they try and cut that tomato versus the way it was before, really you can tell the impact. But it takes a finite touch and a little bit of patience and um, someone to teach you to do it. So like some of the things that you were talking about, I've never heard of before. So that's why I asked. And
yeah,
one other question is,
yeah.
first of all, someone asked, how often do you do it? So my question is a little twist on that, in that sometimes I don't feel like breaking out the entire set of stones, but I need to get a better edge than just a honing steel on my home knives. So like, when you do it, do you go through the entire process like kind of not a
So
religion. What's the word? It's a habit to go through all the steps, or do you skip steps sometimes depending?
yeah, actually, I perform a séance. I light little candles before I
You know
do
what I
that.
mean? It's a
Yeah,
ritual.
no,
That's what
I
I
know
meant to
exactly
say.
what you mean.
It's a ritual.
So I usually tend to do, I'll break out the whetstones once a month, and that just tends to work for my personal uses in my kitchen. I'm not processing large amounts of food for my home cooking, so once a month tends to do it for me. I know kind of what Jim was talking about. My more expensive chef knife will never touch the diamond plated guy here. I won't. It's just I put a lot of money in that knife. That's my baby. It's also my hobby, so it'll never touch that diamond plate. I only use the whetstones on that. But a lot of again, all my other cheaper knives that I'm getting at the restaurant supply house. If I feel like in between kind of whetstones, I'll use that diamond plated knife to get that honing up. I think Jim brought up a couple good points there too. You can feel the difference as you're cutting, and I think it's important to understand too. Using a sharp knife will prevent cuts later down the line. If a knife bites into food, it's not going to bounce or slip. It's going to bite into the product that you want it to bite into without biting in. And when it starts to slip is when you'll go like this, and all of a sudden you got a trip to the ER getting 4 stitches in your finger, which I've done too. So those dull knives are honestly really dangerous. You can feel if a knife is going to bite into food. If you're really having to hack at something, probably time to do some sort of sharpening. There's a lot of stores out there too, your restaurant supply houses. If you're not comfortable doing this at home, you can go get it professionally done for fairly cheap. To where they'll either do a whetstoning or they'll actually do a laser sharpening, which I have no idea how that works. I just know it happens. So you can actually have somebody do it for you and kind of maintain that blade to yourself. A lot of even professional chefs will recommend getting their knives done once a year on a professional level to, again, sharp knives save lives.
Yeah, I do that personally. At least once a year, I take them in and then I maintain them myself. And one of the tips that I use that someone might take away from this is I always teach people not to push the knife, but let the knife do the work. And if the knife won't guide its way through a tomato, then it's time to do some maintenance on it. And it's actually, like Kevin said, very dangerous, because then you're putting more force on the blade instead of letting the knife do the work. And then if you slip or it catches the food a certain way, that's when accidents happen. So, and then one last tip there's a grocery store by me. So next time you're at your local markets, and I think a lot of the smaller ones or the privately owned ones will do this. I believe it was Knob Creek the last time I went. But if you go to their butcher counter at this one particular store, they had a basket that you could put your knives in with, label it with your name, and they get their knives serviced every day. So you could, and it was free. Like if you're a customer of the store, which I just spent $30 to get 4 knives sharpened yesterday. And, it's well worth it. $7 a blade, not too bad. But if you can get it done for free,
Yeah,
check
might
that
as
out
well.
too. Yeah.
And
Thanks,
that's again
man.
too. Jim brought up a good point. Talk to your butchers. Talk to those people. Make a relationship with the people providing your food for you on a daily basis. See, they love to. They're in this industry just like the rest of us. that are kind of on this call. They love to talk about that stuff. So bring up a knife to them once, and that's where you'll find out that kind of cool that kind of cool side stuff that no one else knows about too. A lot of those guys love to help out the community and share their profession with whoever's willing to listen. So talk to those guys. Cool. What else do we got here? How much was my favorite knife? I think my favorite knife, that Mizuno one, was I think it was $130. It was on Amazon. I don't know what it goes for now. I've had it for a couple of years. Um, should you sharpen as well, or the smaller ones? Should you sharp paring knives as well? Oh yeah, every single knife should be sharpened. No matter how big or how small. Again, it's better. Serrated knives are a whole different story. A lot of those you probably just want to get professionally done. Those are a lot harder to do at home. They do sell this little, same as a diamond plated thing I showed you, but it's a cylinder and you can kind of run it across each serrated knife point, but that's kind of a pain. A lot of those knives too will sharpen themselves a little bit over time. Um, Again, if it, oh, what would you suggest to purchase sushi knife? I wouldn't purchase a sushi knife unless it's something you really want to get into. That was kind of one of those it looks cool on my wall kind of things, and I use it twice a year. It was just one of those, I may have been had a couple beers on Amazon at 12 o'clock in the morning when I bought that. Cool. Any other questions, or anybody have anything else that we can talk about as far as knives go? This has always kind of been a hobby of mine. I've got to the point where I've actually been able to slice the edge off of a encyclopedia. So that's kind of fun. But
Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to. How do you test the blade? Like, do you use a piece of paper? Can you show that, or what you do?
yeah, let me see if I have a piece of paper here.
Yeah, I mean, in culinary school, that's how they taught us. We used a piece of like just paper, but
So yeah, you can see, and again, we'll see how good I did, but it should be able to just kind of drop and slide. So you see that kind of came out almost perfectly straight. I didn't put any pressure on it. It just slid right through the piece of paper versus if it wasn't sharp, it would come one way and kind of rip down the piece of paper, so on and so forth. Um, the other way that's not recommended at home, but I can get a knife to sharpen the hair or to shave the hair off my arm, but please don't do that at home. I wasn't going to bring that one up. The other good
don't
one is
do
the
it at work
tomato
either.
test.
That's how you do it, huh, Chip?
That's how I get the head to, use my kitchen blade. Um, the other way
Uh,
is the
please
tomato
don't,
test.
please don't call him chef.
The other way, I'll be
Oh,
able to.
look, I bought this knife for $20, Wizardry, the classic one, and they show you and they come with the steel, and it was really cheap. I mean, I always trying to go and buy knives, not new, but I already know the quality, and I know like Japanese and German knives. That's my favorite ones. But I
Yeah.
was trying to go get a cheap knife. I mean, expensive knife, but cheap.
So the other one too, I'll show you that I didn't bring out too. It's one of my favorite knives I have in my house. I got this at
Oh,
an
that was a
Asian
nice one.
market. It was an Asian food market. It's really cheap. It doesn't hold an edge very well, but I can get it extremely, extremely sharp because the blade and the steel's so thin. And I'll use this for just hammering out like large amounts of parsley or something, just because it has I can get that blade really sharp, but it doesn't hold very long. It was like $3, but it's one of my favorites. It's been in my drawer for, I don't know, forever. Cool. Let's see what else we have. Let me see. I'm just trying to look at my comment box here. Um, how often should I sharpen with a stone? Yeah, like I said, I try to do it once a month. It just depends on your general usage. My my two chef's knives I have get sharpened the most because I use those the most. Or a lot of those other ones I don't even worry about because I'm not using them all the time. Cool. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Oh. Yeah, the Wusthof Trident knives, those are really nice. Again, too, so kind of like Martine was talking about too, go to that local supply house, that restaurant warehouse. You don't need a I have a bad example because I have a really expensive chef knife, but I like doing it for, just for fun. But you don't need the most expensive chef knife in the world. You just need something good quality that's going to hold up. Same things with your pots and your pans, your tongs, your whisks. Those chef supply houses have really good products for a quarter of the price you're going to find at Target and any of those other big box retailers. So, and now everybody's showing off their blade. Awesome.
Sorry, quick question about storage, like how do
Yes.
you, what's the best way to store your knives? Do you just use like, metal, magnet? I heard something about
So
wood blocks one time, said blocks are bad for them.
So blocks, you're still getting a lot of contact with the blade as you slide them in. Okay, so the important part with the block is you need to make sure you have a block that fits your knives. So if you're like me and you have a lot of knives from all over the place, I would recommend getting the magnet on your wall. I just moved into my new little apartment here, so I don't have it on my wall yet because I've been kind of lazy. But those wall magnets work really well. You can just stick them to the wall. Again, I have little kids that float around my house too all the time, so I like that. I put it up nice and high. 6'4", so I don't need to worry about my kids being able to reach them. So I recommend the magnet if you can. Restaurant supply houses, Amazon, you can get those for fairly cheap. And I've
I worry about it if my wife take my knife because she take my knife and she throw on the sink, and I was like, "Oh, you serious?"
Yeah, no, and so again, I don't recommend putting them in a drawer for that same reason. It'll beat them up. When I wash my knives too, they never go in a dishwasher. I wash them by hand. They get dried immediately and they get re-racked right away. So never put them in a dishwasher. Again, that's another safety thing too. If you have a knife in a dishwasher and someone else comes by and opens it up and sticks their hand in there to get a clean plate, that's bad news. So again, knives should be just soap, water. At home, they should be done with soap and water real quick and then just dried and immediately re-racked.
Thanks.
What do you think, Chip? Diamond and steel.
Yeah, so the diamond steel, like I said, it works well. This is the diamond plated block I have.
It's
I
not like
use it in
this.
between. Yeah, so again, those are nice too, but again, those honing steels they're really meant for that kind of between sharpenings, just to kind of keep that blade on a daily basis. Pull it out as soon as you're ready to go. Give it a couple pass throughs, and then get to chopping. I use that more on a daily kind of basis. The diamond steels are definitely better, in my opinion, than the regular chef steel that I have. So if you can find one of those, go for it.
Yeah, Kevin. Also, a good thing to do is I got a knife magnet. I
Yeah.
just stuck it to the side of my refrigerator, and I got all my knives straight up and down on there. It works out perfect.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that'd be good too.
Yeah, that way you don't have to put anything in the wall, and you just stick it right up against your refrigerator, and you can pull them off whenever you want.
Cool. All right. Yeah, Jim said the kids put his in his dishwasher. Yeah, it's timeout time for them. Perfect. Anyone else have any other questions, comments, concerns? I think we just ran over our allotted time here, so cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm glad we did. This was kind of one of those topics that we wanted to. Somebody had said this topic on Slack, so it was recommended to us, and I kind of jumped at the opportunity to do that. So if anybody else has any kind of things that they want to see over the next month, go ahead and put them out on Slack, and we'll try to cover them best we can. Other than that, again, thanks for joining, thanks for participating, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Kevin.